Yeah, I want to go over some of these frequencies actually for Royal Rife and John Crane. And I'm going to tell you over here is something probably you're not going to get off the internet. So, for instance, like a lot of confusion is about what the hell, where did Crane come up with these frequencies? Let's see, you can see that red dot on there? Please, if you can see that. I'll probably point to it this way instead. I'm not sure if that's coming out by the camera. This way. And, for instance, let's see if that comes out. Yeah, it probably comes out, but I'll probably point to it this way. For instance, here's an original Rife frequency, 192,000. Uses sine wave, streptothrix. Crane comes up with 784. How does he come up with it? What they were doing, it looks like, they were trying to hide the actual real Rife's work, because if they let it out of the bag, there's no way you can patent a frequency. That's all there is to it. It probably is that way. So what they did, instead of like dividing this by, say, 1,000 or 500, or making a frequency set saying, like, I'm going to divide this by, I don't know, 10 and 100 and 500, and say those three frequencies will use the pad type square wave zapper or whatever to use that. Instead, they used random digits. So, for instance, when he came up with 784 here, this one, 784, he divided by 245. So when you divide by 245, now that's an odd number, so that will work if you have a 50% duty cycle. It hits odd multipliers. It could possibly hit this, but it actually divides out to exactly 783.7. He rounds it to 784. So actually, if you're going to use this Crane frequency 784, you should be using 783.7. You see, that's what they were doing, and this didn't work all the time that well. You know, actually, you should be using. We don't have all the Royal Rife, the regular Royal Rife frequencies. We got some of them, but the other caveat is this: you can actually maybe derive other Rife frequencies from Crane's list by finding common multipliers in there and multiplying them up. You might be able to find some. It's a painstaking process. Maybe a computer can actually do that. But I was kind of messing around with it, and I think there's possibly ways that you can find them. And I think people have found them, but they keep them as proprietary work. You know, this is not something that's used in the United States as medical treatment. It should be, though. It should be. It's safe if it's done correctly. And for it to be more successful, it really does require a skilled doctor, because when Rife applied these frequencies, he was working with skilled doctors, so the doctor could say, well, yeah, you did that, and that seems to be working because we took these tests, we looked at this, we observed this, we looked at things, it looked like it was working. And Rife was the engineer, and it says, well, and then we tell him, like, well, wait a minute, that didn't work for this person, and Rife would adjust something and try something else, and then a medical professional was able to ascertain that, hey, this is working. So back in the 30s, Rife did cure 16 out of 16 cancer patients, but not by himself. He worked with medical professionals, so this does not replace medical professionals. It's just a new method. But the other thing is here, for instance, like anthrax. Rife had 139,200. Now, if you divide it by 278, you come up with 500.7. He might have been using 139,000 exactly and dividing it out. He came up with 500. It really would be closer to 501 or 500.7. B. coli. 770,000. Rife, the John Crane frequency for the pad type machine is 1552 hertz. He divided it by 496. That comes up to 1552.4. He's just using random digits to divide it by. Now the problem is with this, if you're using a 50% duty cycle on 496, you're only hitting odd multipliers. You're not exactly hitting this. But then again, he's off a little bit by saying 1552 instead of 1552.4. You know? See, that's why these aren't as quite as effective, too. They'd be probably more effective if you used the exact thing. Well, it'd be more effective if you just used the right frequencies right from the beginning. But the other thing is That's why a lot of the times you'll see these other people that are more professional people. They're not advertising on the internet that for medical services or nothing, but you'll see they don't use a 50% duty cycle hardly ever. They'll use a 71%, 73%, 88%, 78%, 93%, 90%, depending on where they want to hit as close as possible this. And so, for instance, here, B. coli rod form Rife. And these are known frequencies that we know that Rife did. These are right ones. 417 is 417,000. Crane puts it at 800. He divided by 521 to come up with 800.4. Come up with 800.4, and he rounded it to 800. You'd really be better off using 800.4. Now, in that case, the 50% duty cycle should work because it's an odd number. Here's another one. Here's another one. 2128. You know, this is a very well-known Rife frequency, 1,604,000. He divided by 754 to come up with 27.3. So actually 27.5 or and a half might be better. Same with this one. This is a real common one known. 478,000 for Rife. Crane comes up with 728. He divided by 657. Actually, you'll see 727 and 728 is often listed on a lot of these frequency lists. It's used in almost every Rife session. The problem is it really should be 727.5 to be more accurate. See that? And when you're using zappers, you think they're anywhere near that number? The only one I know that's actually on that number, where it actually says the number that's right, is the Zapper My. And it's not a commercial or nothing, but I'm just telling you that's a fact. And unless you get a full-size frequency generator, and but as far as a battery-operated device, the only one I know that's accurate enough to get right on to the at least average, a whole integer like this is the Zapper My. Now, this technology is going to get perfected even more. But say, for instance, here we have, I didn't do this one, but say we skip over here to Streptococcus, 720,000. Crane comes up with 880. He divided by 818. He actually came up with 880.2. That would be the more correct number. See what they're doing? They're hiding their work. There is a method to the madness. The problem is when you use 880, like say for instance, even if you used 880.2 and you used a 50% duty cycle, you're not going to multiply by 818 and come up with that, because you're only hitting odd harmonics with a 50% duty cycle. That's why almost all the time when you're looking at the real McCoy stuff, it's not using a 50% duty cycle. You have to use duty cycles that contain even harmonics also, because he divided by an even number. See that? These guys were hiding their work. That's what all of them were. The only one that wasn't was this guy, Royal Rife himself. Mr. Royal Rife was the open and honest one. He's the one that got most persecuted, I guess. Who the hell knows? What the hell else is new, right? So, for instance, here you got syphilis, 7789. Actually, there's new strains of syphilis out here that are totally gonorrhea and syphilis. Now, this might be useful to try to treat this. I don't know if this will work or not, but I'm just telling you, 789,000. Now, the new strain might be a different frequency too. That's the other thing. So I don't even know, but they got new STDs out there that are resistant to all drugs, penicillin and everything else, right? I don't know if I'm putting it, that's syphilis, right? So he divided that by 1195. He comes up with 660.3, right? Averages it out. He makes it 660. There you go. So actually 660.3 would be better. In this case, since it's an odd number, the 50% duty cycle should work, Now, tetanus, the only one that actually comes up nice and even. Now, this guy, this is aggravating because they didn't want anybody to find their work out. So if he was going to be like a normal person, say, for instance, he was going to use like this, 1950, we're coming up with 120. Actually, I would have divided him by 1,000 and 500 and maybe some other number, and said those three frequencies would be the ones for the pad type Rife machine. Actually, I wouldn't even use 1,000. I'd probably you would have to also have to specify if you're going to divide this up original frequency, like original Rife frequency. You might want to divide this by say 11, come up with a number, and then use the 50% duty cycle, and it will hit the 11th harmonic, no problem. That might be a better way to do it. But Crane didn't do that. He didn't do that. You know, I don't know. I mean, I think he was coming up with these lower numbers because at the time they didn't have these, you know, to make a little portable device. I don't think they had, like, they could generate these high frequencies with little portable devices. Today you can. So I don't know why you don't just use these in the first place, you know, except the problem is the list is pretty short. So then you got tuberculosis rod form, 369,000. He divided by 459 to come up with 802. Now, 802 and 803 are fairly common ones. So that's probably what the deal is. So anyway, here we have 1,005,445 and divided by 776. So anyway, the tuberculosis rod form, you have both 802 and 803 are pretty common frequencies, and that's where he's coming up with these numbers. It's probably 802.12 would be closer. This, I don't know how he came up with this. There could be an unknown frequency too. That's another thing. It could have been another unknown Rife frequency that he came up with this. The fact, and he might have made some errors too. That's the other thing too. He might have, but generally not. 1,445,000 typhoid fever. You can see that typhoid fever, right? So again, he divided by 1862. Excuse me. He divided by 776 to come up with 1862.1. He rounded to 1862. Typhoid fever rod form divided by 1067, come up with 712.3. And when you round these out to 712.3 and you say it's 712, by the time it hits this harmonic, and even if it hits that with using different duty cycle other than 50% because it's 712, it's going to be off. That's a big margin. That's a big margin. So this guy was a yo-yo too, man. I'll tell you what, they all were, except Rife. And I think a lot of people, researchers out there today, aren't telling you the whole deal. So actually, if you use 784, you should be using 783.7. Using 500, you should be using 500.7. And what devices out there have that accuracy in a zapper? I don't know. 1552.4 should be that. 800.4. 2127.3. 727.5 should be the more accurate one. Now I left one out. That's actually a very popular cancer frequency. 2008. 2008 would be better to use 2007.5. So actually, zapper, if you're going to have a zapper, it should actually be able to program any frequency to the decimal point and have at least one other option besides a 50% duty cycle, maybe a 78% or an 88%, something where it's going to give you some kind of even harmonic so you'd have a better chance of hitting an original Rife frequency. 660 should be 660.3. 120, that's the only one he's got like nice and even Steven, But then he's dividing it by an even number, so 50% duty cycle won't work with that. You'd have to use like a 78% was a good choice. And it depends on how many multiples up you got. Like I have a spreadsheet that shows up to the 64th harmonic, which is pretty high up there. And, with the calculations. Now, I don't remember I used to be a math major before I switched to accounting. Had all the 30. You needed 24 credits in math. I had 30 credits. I was in a math club. I don't remember calculus at all, but I do have the calculations on how to come up with all the harmonics on the various duty cycles. So actually, a real zapper that you would really need is something to really be effective. Would be 100% positive offset. It doesn't have to be programmable. It can have one frequency at a time, but you got to be able to put it to the nearest decimal point. It's got to be that accurate, and it's got to have a choice other than 50% duty cycle. Maybe 78 would be a good choice, and where it hits odd and even harmonics, and then use like these frequencies instead. And it would probably work a lot better. Now, the other thing is, if you diagnose yourself and you say, hey, I got, I'm going to try to get rid of cancer, and I think I got this kind, and you don't have that kind, there's many, many, many different kinds of cancers, and say, for instance, you use everything correct, and you say 21, 27.3, and you're not, it's not going to work, man. It's not going to work. That's why you still need medical professionals. But I like to point this out to medical professionals because this is going to be a great adjunct to the standard medical professional treatments that are out there right now and help lower cost and make more successful treatments with zero side effects, basically, because every medicine out there, pharmaceutical, pretty much has a side effect. This type of stuff, there really isn't any side effects. That's what's cool about it. So, and it's cheap. But you still need a paid person that understands, that can diagnose the patient and say, are you actually getting better? We're doing measurements. We're looking for the virus or whatever. We're looking for the pathogen. And is it really working? So you need a medical professional in any case. So that's the way it goes.